it has been a crazy journey. I mean, from so many concepts changed, at the beginning we had very little data, then we actually managed to get lots of data because we had no data loss. I remember 15 years ago calling one of the world's biggest tech companies and saying, can we have all your data? And they were like, okay, but how? And we just were able to pick it up, went there with flash drives, and we were sitting there and thinking like, we don't need to build any models with this data.
At the end of the day, a business needs to use AI to make money and eventually feed that money back into the growth of the business. So have you seen realistic ROI expectations being translated into actual ROI, or it's still a little bit of piper's dream?
So if AI is done properly, if it's calculated properly, then you do get a very positive ROI.
Hello everyone, I'm Umair, and we are again on an episode of BetterTech with Dr. Eva-Marie today with us. She has been an accomplished professional, a top-level executive, and I'll first let her introduce herself, and then we will dive right into some of the interesting topics that is of talk of the every tech meetup these days around AI and many other things. So over to you, Dr. Eva. Why don't you take a few moments and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me today, Umair. I'm Dr. Eva-Marie Müller-Stuler. I lead the AI practice at Ernst & Young here in the Middle East. We focus on pretty much everything from data governance according to the rules and regulations in the countries where we are and according to the needs of the companies, to use case building, dashboard building, all the way to scalable AI, ethical AI, and visualization. So pretty much all end to end. On the data science, data governance to AI side is what my team is focusing on. Before I
Wonderful.
joined EY, I was a CTO for artificial intelligence at IBM here in MENA. So I'm in the region for over 7 years now, 7.5. And I set up Europe's first data science and AI team at KPMG over 10 years ago. I'm a mathematician by background, and I also wrote my PhD in medical physics using AI algorithm or developing AI algorithms and machine learning algorithms to understand
Right.
things in human bodies.
Wonderful. So we have a highly accomplished professional with us today as a PhD,
Thank you.
and you had a background from KPMG and IBM, and right now you're at EY. Wonderful, and all these years have been working in data and AI. So that's great. So let's, before we get into a little bit smaller micro details, I mean, you had been in this AI and data streams for nearly a couple of decades now. And AI, I have seen AI being shifted from very classical AI, where you were doing a lot of classification, clustering kind of problem and doing predictions and projections. Then vision kind of took over as the forefront of the AI thing, and then followed by these GPTs and Gen AI. So, I mean, from the top of the world and very 30,000 view of the world, how you seeing the shift that is happening over the last 2 decades in AI and data science, and how you see it? I mean, before we go deeper down into it, when people think of that AI as probably a good computer fantasy to something which is realistic, and now we are talking about AJ. So how are you thinking about it from, or looking at it from the top?
Oh, it has been a crazy journey. I mean, from so many concepts changed, at the beginning we had very little data. Then we actually managed to get lots of data because we had no data loss. I remember 15 years ago calling one of the world's biggest telco companies and saying, can we have all your data? And they were like, okay, but how? And we just were able to pick it up, went there with flash drives, and we were sitting there and thinking like, we don't need to build any models with this data, because we have so many insights in who on the planet is, or in these countries is where, who's paying whose bills, who's sleeping where overnight, and so on. If somebody is not going on holidays with their wives and so on, what is going on? So now with GDPR, this craziness stopped or is limited. But we also have all the other questions of how do we make our models ethical. And so the amount of use cases where we can use AI has absolutely exploded. We have new tools and technologies every single day. The biggest concern is that we keep the quality up or increase the quality. Because a lot of the AI that is used today and implemented today is not delivering on the promise, is not delivering the ROIs, and all the ethical expectations we have on AI, that it's transparent, that it's explainable, that it's non-biased, that it's security protecting, and so on. There are not often in place with small data models, let alone with big data models. And at the moment, when we are building a solution with large language models, we often even have no idea what data they're trained on and what the bias actually is.
Right.
And now we have the other problems of hallucinations, and where we even say it gave you an answer, but you take no guarantee that it's actually got anything to do with reality. So it adds a complete new level of confusion, I think, to people.
Right. So you touched upon a lot of important topics, like, and we will deal with some of them at various point in the podcast, which is how to deal with bias in the training and the bias in the model output and hallucination and the data and its security and so on and so forth. Because you had a career working with top consulting companies like KPMG, IBM, and now EY, how the big guys like yourself are looking at this Gen AI and hype around Gen AI, because I'm any and every customer that I talk to, even if they have a standard digital transformation use case, they're trying to solve it with AI. And because you can talk to them because they want to talk about AI. So what you're seeing, I mean, let's divide the question into three segments. I mean, there are enterprises and there are small medium businesses and then there are startups.
Mhm.
So given your long tenure in these large consulting companies, how do you see all these segments? What are the kind of challenges they have? What are the kind of adoptions you're looking at? And where can there be an ROI? So let's start with enterprises, because I think you guys work a lot with enterprises. How are you seeing the AI challenges, AI adoption in the enterprise happening? And what could be the roadmaps that you're looking at?
So we have massive interest in AI, because even though we've been saying it for a very long time, is you can either transform now or you'll end up playing catch up. With everybody suddenly getting hands-on experience with the tools like ChatGPT, DeepSeek, they really start to realize, oh my God, if my kids do all their homework with these tools, then there should be a way for us to do better, smarter business decisions. So with that, we have a lot of the large enterprises automating their processes, saying, okay, how much can we do on, for example, invoicing and so on? How much can we improve our training material? A lot of the large corporations invest a lot into the training of their people and have their own trainings. So how do we translate that, for example, into our own rack system, where we can use large language models to get our information out there, our processes in complicated operations, and saying, okay, how can we actually build that in a secure way, to say we want to improve things, we want to have handbooks, what to do, what goes wrong, and so on, maintenance issues, and so basically the whole end-to-end for corporates on that side. And because they're large enterprises, they normally have large teams, and so that they can actually save a lot of money for implementing them and running them themselves.
Right. So, I mean, when you touched upon a little that, I mean, the very basic use case that comes to my mind is build a rack store, and so that the organization has their own knowledge base. But the whole idea of building agentic workflows and agents on top of it, where they can work autonomously. I mean, I've been talking to executives as well, but have you started seeing use cases beyond customer support and knowledge bases, where companies are using actually agents to do a lot of stuff autonomously, where an agent can think on its own as well? Or you still the vast amount use cases you're coming across are still RAG and customer support and sales and marketing, where some sort of hallucination is okay?
No, we actually have. I'm working with a few at the moment as well, where they're completely going all in, and they're saying, okay, we have part of our operation, and we want completely automatize that, and you want to have, for example, saying, okay, we want to take all the data, yeah, and have a maintenance plan and everything for this house, which
Hmm.
in the end means it's underlying many use cases, from tenant optimization, tenant payment, energy optimization, and forecasting, and so on. And for that, you actually bring in together, yeah, LLMs, you bring together rack system, agentic AI, and so on to make that work. And for large corporations, they focus more and more on that, and they have huge successes and big savings because their processes are often very, very complex. And they can benefit very much of the synergies. If you have a house and you know who's in the lift, you also know who's in the flat. You also know how to optimize the temperature and so on. So there's a lot of interdependencies that can bring big success for your business.
All right. So, I mean, in terms of uh, generally, who is the end buyer right now these days in the enterprises for AI? Is it the CIO, Office of CIO, or individual C-suite who are talking to you, or there's someone else who actually is interested in getting this AI related workflows and transformation being implemented within the enterprise?
So very much in the past, it often came from the CIO, but the CIO is actually not the wrong was always the wrong person because the CIO is not part of the business and it needs to come out
Right.
of the business. And we know it in business ourselves. If our CIO, CTO gives us a new laptop, we're already against it, even though it's a better laptop. I'm like, but I didn't ask for it. So it does have to come clearly on from the business, and then it's a question of it could be the CEO, CFO, CEO, COO, and saying, okay, we have actually a massive amount of money that is and really high cost in ABC. Isn't there a way to do that smarter? Or we're losing lots and lots of revenue in this area to our competition. Can we reduce can we improve our revenue? So for me, it's always data science and AI should improve revenue, cut cost, or manage the risk. And if it doesn't fall clearly into one of these three things, then you can also say, okay, this is my research and innovation. These are my moonshots, but you should know where you're placing it and what your bets are.
And in terms of budgets, what kind of budgets are now getting allocated to AI? So let's say if a organization, a large organization used to spend 100x on digital transformation and overall transformation, and what percentage of now has been right now they're focusing on spending on AI and what you're seeing actually?
So yeah, that also has increased over the last few years. Where in the past, often was the idea of like, oh, can we have a very small POC for very little money? The time of POCs is actually pretty much dead now because the concept has been proven. But digital transformation is now turning more and more into an AI transformation. So
Right.
it's really about the technology, it's about the processes, it's about the culture. All of that needs to change in an organization. And so because it comes from the C-suite, they're also aware of that it's not just a plug and play technology, that it's actually it comes with we always say we want high impact, but high impact is something very negative if it goes wrong. It's only positive impact that we actually want, not high impact.
Right.
And with that, there's a clear agenda of saying, okay, how do we build it in a trusted way, and how do we actually then make sure it gets implemented in the company processes and culture. And so there's the focus is not just on the small bit of code, but actually around all of it.
That's interesting. One more thing is, I mean, we have been doing digital transformation for now decades, and no people understand how you go about giving out the requirements for building any software or for that matter, digital transformation. How would you accept that? With AI, we do understand that there is no perfect answer, and sometimes they will hallucinate, sometimes the answer they'll give because you're talking to a brain and using it in your process. So there will not always be perfection. I'm interested in finding out, are the big consulting companies have they kind of found new frameworks of finding and figuring out how to go about agentic transformation as well as how to get an overall acceptance of these large projects? Because normally you won't have a very perfect answer or the solution if you're using a an LLM at the end of the day?
I think everyone is nowadays aware that LLMs hallucinate. So
Right.
it's important to pick use cases that they do have room for error. And but then when it comes, for example, to structured data and questions like that on how to bring the few solutions together and how to really tailor it that you get control of the error and yet that you can minimize it. At the moment, nobody expects when it comes to, or we should not fully automate at the moment large language models and RAG solutions for high stake decisions where there is a right or wrong. When the question is, okay, what do I do if my house burns? And the RAG somewhere found that oil burns and it answers with open the gas tap or something like that. You do need to have the human still in the loop to make sure that something like that is not fully automated and the solution cannot just turn on the taps itself and things like that.
Right. Right.
So every technology comes with limitations. And I think just being open about these are the limitation with this and these are the limitation with that, and maybe the large language model and RAG system isn't the right solution for that. Maybe a linear regression on
Yeah.
structured data works so much better and gives you a far more safer result. And maybe it's something that is not possible to optimize yet because the risk is too high, the costs are too high, and the return on investment is actually very low.
Right, right. We'll get to this return on investment question as well because this is what a lot of people are claiming that AI is not providing the return of investment as it was claiming. But before getting there, I mean, in terms of within the AI space, if I talk about the AI stack, there is a infrastructure layer where you have GPUs and other stuff, and then on top of it there are, let's say, foundation or frontier models, and on top of it there are framework space and then application space. I feel I probably and would feel the same way that the largest opportunities in the application development space because the frontier models will be dominated by a few. Is this a kind of a correct assumption, or you think otherwise?
Oh, good question. So, I think yes, they are bringing a lot of new things to the table, and they make a lot of. We do see so far the highest impact that we've ever seen based on them. Yes, a lot of like customer services, a lot of creative work, and so on. A lot of writing and so on has become much faster, much easier. Certain processes, invoicing and so on, can be dealt with much faster. So yeah, I do, but I do think it's always like a step for step layer. So we saw big jumps when image recognition got better, and we started to use deep learning techniques. We saw big jumps when we actually were able to handle bigger data because of better hardware. We saw big jumps when we got better data quality, and people start to realize it's not just boy with a hoodie in the basement, your data scientist, and it's not just about building the smartest code, but you actually need to have a diverse team around it to make sure that it's successful.
Okay. So there, I mean, there are opportunities all over the place when it comes to AI, and especially also in the application layer. One question is that you've spent your last 6 7 years, as you mentioned, in the MENA region,
Yeah.
and uh, and you must be also aware of what is happening in terms of the advancement of AI in the, let's say, US and probably China, etc. So how do you see MENA being different or similar in terms of opportunities to exploit for AI for services companies, for product companies, as compared to, let's say, US? So are you seeing a different set of opportunities over here, let's say in the MENA region, as compared to maybe US, or they're almost the same? And what are these opportunities in your opinion?
No, I think actually MENA has transformed massively, and especially Saudi is at the moment a massive driver in AI. They invested heavily into their workforce. They have the Saudi Data and AI Authority, SADAYA, where they have really good guidelines on saying, okay, how do we make sure that every governmental entity and also later every company has good data quality and is AI ready and data science ready. What are the roles they have to have? What reporting do they have to do, and so on. So that was a massive jump in the development. Saudi has put a lot of money into building the good foundations, into building amazing talents, has put great processes in place on saying, okay, if you come in as a consultant, you have a quota of Saudis that you have to actually employ on your project. So you don't come in, do something and take the IP with you. You're actually training on the job. And so at the moment, Saudi, UAE, Qatar, the whole Middle East is very, very focused on how can we improve as a society, how can we look forward, and the awareness that in the past the money came from oil and gas and that is not a sustainable energy. So even how can we improve our oil and gas exploration, can we improve life for the citizens, how can we make sure AI is ethical, and so on. So there are huge opportunities at the moment, and yeah, the countries are very, very interested and focused on how to build good AI. And what they've learned actually is, by maybe starting later, is they learn from the mistakes from the others without having
Yeah.
to go through them. So they didn't have 10 years of unethical or untrusted AI. They because they saw the foundations and said, okay, now let's build on that. So I can only yeah, say for every company there is it's a huge market and it will only grow more and more and more.
So, but so what I'm getting from your answer and with my understanding as well is that right now there is a lot of investment going from the government and other companies into building the underlying AI infrastructure and all that. Have you started seeing business getting the ROI? At the end of the day, a business needs to use AI to make money and eventually feed that money back into the growth of the business. So, have you seen realistic ROI expectations being translated into actual ROI, or it's not, it's still a little bit of piper's dream?
No, no. So if AI is done properly, if it's calculated properly, then you do get a very positive ROI. If you transform your organizations, if your people in the company do trust in the AI,
Hmm.
so they can actually change their decision making, you will end up having a positive ROI on your but if you're still building it in, as I mentioned before, like, okay, we have 5 guys and they're all like, here's your data, do whatever you want. They spend a year playing around and come up and say, oh, Fridays people wear brown shoes, and you kind of look at them like, thanks, and where's the ROI and what is the business impact? And they'd be like, I don't know. But if you start right from the beginning and said, okay, what is our business actually doing? Where are we thinking we lose too much money? Where do we think we can improve on the cost, and so on? And you start with very clear, defined use cases. Start with the design thinking workshop and saying, how do we actually, what are the personas that are going to use the solution so that everyone is on the same page? Because I often see badly built AI that every stakeholder had a different expectations on what it means. Everyone agrees on the title and says, okay, heating optimization in a flat, for example, and one person means, okay, as cold as possible, just so that people don't die. And the next person says everyone should be comfortable. The next person said, oh no, we should focus on saving the energy. And so everybody might have a different angle. But and so the data scientist team might even get lost between all the stakeholders. And but if you have a very good defined use case, you can calculate all the costs upfront, or how much it will cost, and then see the revenue impact and saying, okay, this is how we see it going forward. Then there are lots of stories about very successful use cases where clients have saved a lot of money.
Wonderful. So, I mean, this is an interesting discussion. We can keep going on, but before we close, I have to touch upon on these a few topics that you mentioned. I mean, let's. So we talked about how AI is actually uh, kind of being implemented in the businesses and how everyone is interested about that. Now, talking about some sensitive parts. I mean, there are two, three things that I want to talk about in what you're saying. How AI is going to affect the future job market, how it is affecting the employability of the fresh graduates, because I feel that a lot of base level work is getting automated. And then obviously the third part, how companies are tackling the problem of hallucination as well as bias in AI. And fourth, and the last one, your opinion on AGI. So let's start with the first one. How you're looking at the job market, first and second, you can combine first and second, the job market being shifted in the next few years, as well as new people coming out of the college. Programming used to be a great thing. I mean, now AI is doing a lot of that. So, what's your take on this one and two about the shift in the job market? What you're seeing in the next 1 to 2 years or
So,
3 years, maybe?
so we will see big shifts in the job markets, but we actually have seen that for a very long time. I remember when I studied mathematics, everybody was saying, "Oh, what are you going to do? Are you going to become a teacher, or are you going to be an actuary and work in insurance?" And I combined mathematics with computer science and business, and everybody was like, "Why?" These things have nothing to do with each other. And you can't really connect the dots going forward. So nowadays, that's a combination that is most sought for. I'm saying, okay, I want somebody who has actually deep mathematical understanding in the AI, or that was in the past. And nowadays, we actually look a lot in companies for us, people who say, you don't really need to understand the math behind it, you need to be able to use it. Where we go from the mathematician who can explain why 5 times 3 is 15 to the person who can use a calculator.
Yeah.
And so these shifts in job markets we've always seen, and yes, they will become bigger and bigger. But I think the most important thing is to actually find your niche and what you really enjoy, and be good in what you enjoy. And then we are living in times of continuous learning, so we all have to stay adaptable. So I once had this heard this beautiful quote that every top performing company actually and top performing team renew themselves by 30% every year.
Right.
And that's why for people to stay on top of what they in the top performing list, you should at the end of every year basically say, what are the 30% of skills that I don't need going forward, and what are the new 30% that I'm going to learn? And that is something that will become very important in the future.
I think that was one of the very interesting thought, that if you are in part of any top performing team, then what is the 30% that you can do new?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Uh, the the second question is how to deal with bias and safety issues around AI.
They are very, very important, and especially here in the region, and in the global south. All AI data sets are very biased. I promise you, in the US healthcare database, there are very little Emirati women over 65. So when we buy healthcare solutions here in the region, they probably, or there is a high risk of them not really performing on our demographics. So what is important then to understand is really what data set was it trained on, and does it reflect the use cases you want to build? Even when we look at our world is very biased, so of course our data is biased. When we look at who got a loan and who didn't get a loan in the 80s,
Even humans are very biased. I mean, depends upon the circumstances you are grew in, and that's your
yeah,
bias,
yeah,
even in humans. Yeah.
exactly, yeah, and that's why we have these massively biased data sets.
Right.
So the best thing to fight bias is always a diverse team. The more diverse your team is, the more likely they are going to pick up on something and saying, hold on, people like me who are under 175, that solution doesn't work. Or people who are my color, the image recognition doesn't work, and so on. A lot of the biases in AI historically were detected by people who are actually part of the group in one way or the other that was discriminated against. So the diverse team is definitely the number one. Then there is you can test for biases. So plot the data, look at the data, use technical tools, and say how can we measure the biases to make sure we don't have any bias in there, and then keep on monitoring that we won't have any bias in the future coming in.
That's a good perspective. If you have a very diverse team, they will pick up on biases and can kind of halt the process and then help you do the right stuff. And the last question, what's your thought on AGI? Is it as really as scary as Jeffrey Hinton and some other predict, or you think otherwise onto that?
So we used to say, or I used to say, you know what, AGI is not our biggest problem, and what we really have to focus on is bias and making sure that AI is trustable and ethical and works, because we are at risk of burning so many resources and so on with not working AI. We are at risk of, during COVID, for example, with bad prediction models, with and so on, of completely not understanding what was going on, because our data collection on COVID was already so wrong. And if you measured COVID in an area, and we measured it for everybody, of course, our numbers are much higher than in an area where we don't measure at all. That doesn't
Right.
mean one area is better than the other. So a lot of my past concern was always about trusted AI, transparency, bias, and accuracy, and so on, and safety of AI solutions. I am now thinking that we are getting closer and closer to AGI. The problem that I see many problems. So first of all, we have more and more misinformation in the world. We have more and more fake news, deep fake videos. We can fake voices, everything, and so because of all that noise, I hear more and more people saying, "Okay, we don't even know who to trust anymore. We don't know which news are right or wrong." So we are at risk of having more and more chaos in the world. Our democracies are very much under attack at the moment, and not just attack democracies, but actually every social society, every ruler, every body has to be careful about the communication and the things that come out there. More information doesn't mean better information. When the printing press came out, the worst read book was Copernicus' book about the solar system, and the most read book was about witchcraft and so on, and crazy fantasies of a very disturbed man. But people read it so much that these disturbed fantasies became truth. And that is also a risk that we see with AI, that because they mirror of each other, they learn of each other, they interacted, that we might actually end up with losing the knowledge that we actually have in the past. So with them being connected, if one of them goes wrong, it might take milliseconds to take all the others down with them, and every single one will act in a way that might not be good or harmful for us. I still don't see the risk really of a Terminator and a Starlink, but I do see a risk of our AI to us human. And I do think there is a probability of it taking over and esting mankind by now. And that's why we have to be very careful on what we actually set free.
Right. I think I kind of agree with that. And before I let you go, I
It,
just missed one question. If
on that
I'm a
point,
small,
it is a very different answer to what I would have given 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I would have
yeah,
focused on
same
what
here,
is
same
problem
here,
now.
same here. We would laughed at this
Yeah.
the question that AGI, and but now it's because started to, in a way, we do have a bit of AGI. I mean, it's not at the level of maybe very high intellect, but I mean, these systems are thinking and making up on their own if they're hallucinating and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, one last quick, and you can have a very quick answer to that. If I'm a small consulting company or a startup today, in an application development space, what are kind of opportunities that I can make use of, which may not, I mean, let's say I'm a small consulting company, I cannot kind of compete with IBMs and AYs of the world, but what are my opportunities out there in this space
Oh
from
wow.
your eyes?
So what we see at the moment in small consulting companies is that they focus on one solution and become the expert in that, and that seems to work quite well for them. So when they're saying, okay, we build educational software in Arabic using large language models, or we are building image recognition, especially tailored for this and this use case, and get really precise in that. So if it's quite niche, and they have a good understanding what is their potential market, for example, VRs or something, automated speech automation in Arabic and so on, with the different dialects, things that the big companies wouldn't focus on because the implementation costs and so on and the market share that these have are too small, but they're still huge for any startups. I think that's a good area to focus. So niche products, basically.
Wonderful. So, Dr. Eva, thank you very much for being with us today. I think your thoughts are wonderful and they are truly valuable for our audience. So, we look forward this episode to get published, and then maybe we can have another one with you where we can talk more about that. But thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for your time, Umair. Thank you for inviting me.